This is Gemara in Kesubos, the Daf Samoch. All the learning for this month, the month of Elul, has been generously sponsored as an incredible zchos. Neshama of Reyzel Basra Meir, Emir Tashem, Reyzel Basra Meir's Neshama should be Eilat on higher in place. In Ganedel Shamayla, closer and closer to the Kisei HaKavod, and the zchos of the entire Chabura is learning each and every day in her zchos. And we pick it up from the last line of the Testament Bees, in which we were discussing the obligations of a wife to her husband. And the Mishnah yesterday taught us all the different actions that a woman has to do to her husband. She has to grind and bake and do the laundry, etc. And one thing that we saw in the Mishnah is that a woman is obligated. We had a machlekes to nurse her son. But the Mishnah said that in Haya Makira, but if the child recognizes the mother, then even after she is divorced, the husband has to pay her, and then she's forced to nurse. Of course, the reason being that it's a sakana. If the baby has no food to eat, and if the baby is only going to nurse from his mother, then the husband is obligated to support his ex-wife to nurse their baby. So says the Gemara in the last line, the Maya Makira. If the baby recognizes the mami, as we turn over to Daf Samoch Amid Aleph, asks the Gemara, Ad Kama, at what age? Well, 1 second, there you go. Ad Kama, says the Gemara, at what age do we assume that the child recognizes its mother and will not nurse from anyone else? As Rashi points out, how many months are we discussing that he knows, the child knows that this is his mommy? So Amar Rava says, Rav Amar Mir Bar Abba, Amar Rav, Shlish Chadash, 3 months. Shmuel Amar, Shlishim Yom, 30 days. Rav Yitzchak Amar, Rav Yechlan, Chamishim Yom, 50 days. So 3 different opinions, and finally, Amar Rav Simi Bar Abaya, Halacha ki Rav Yitzchak. The halacha is like Rav Yitzchak, and the name Rav Yechanan, Shamishim Rav Yechanan, that is indeed 50 days. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Bish Lamar Rav Yechanan, I understand Rav and Rav Yechanan. Rav says 3 months. Rav Yechanan says 50 days. Kol chad v'chad ki chorfe. Each child according to its sharpness, each child according to how quickly it picks things up. Is it take 3 months, or does it take 50 days for the child to realize who its mommy is regarding to nursing? El Shmuel. But ask the Gemara, according to Shmuel, ask the Gemara, do we have such a scenario that a child could recognize its mother so early at 30 days? 30 days is very, very young, asked the Gemara. As Rashi points out, that it's understandable 50 days, understandable 3 months, but to say 30 days, how could that be? Answers the Gemara, Kiyasa Rami Bar Yecheskel Amar, don't listen to these rules. The Kayal Yehuda Achi Mishmid Shmuel. The Yehuda, my brother, said the name of Shmuel. Why? Because Achi Amar Shmuel. Because really, what did Shmuel say? Calls man Shemakira. Shmuel didn't give an age. Shmuel didn't say that it's necessarily 30 days. Rather, whenever the child recognizes the mother. How do we know if the child recognizes the mother? We'll see and then soon Gemara in a moment. As the Gemara continues, the Gemara says that Shmuel, there was a certain woman who was divorced. She didn't want to nurse her child anymore, so she came in front of Shmuel. Amar le Rav Dimi Bar Yosef. So Shmuel said to Rav Dimi Bar Yosef, Zil Badka, go and test the child, see if the child knows who the mommy is. Azal Asvei B'dari Dinashi. So he went and he put the child in front of a bunch of women, V'shakle Libra, and he took her son, V'kamahader le Yalayu. And the son, and then he took the son, and he passed the son by all the different women. And kimata legabe legaba, when this child passed in front of its mother, havikam masvi leapa, the child was looking at his mother's face. Kivashtinu leene mina. So what happened? So the mommy turned his face away. So the child doesn't recognize her. So Amar Allah, Rav Dimi said, Notaf einayich, lift up your eyes, come and nurse your child. Saying, clearly the child recognizes you, so you're obligated to nurse him. Suma mina yada. What if, Rahman al-Hassan, if a child is blind, how would we know if the child recognizes its mother? And Rashi, Berecha ubetaima, by scent and by taste, we'll be able to tell if the child recognizes the mother. Tanu Rabbanan, continues the Gemara, exactly the length of time, how old is the child? Tanu Rabbanan, Yoinei tinak v'hoylech ad 24 chodesh. Now we're learning the bookends, the other end. Says the Gemara, a child is allowed to nurse until 24 months old. Mikan ve'ilach ki yoinei sheket divi Rav Eliezer. Rav Eliezer holds a child above more than 24 months, it's disgusting for that child to nurse. Rav Yeshua Imer says, Rav Yeshua, afilu arba v'cham yishanim, child is allowed to nurse even 4 or 5 years. However, piresh, lachar esim v'arba chodesh. If a child stopped nursing after 24 months, the chazar, and the child resumes nursing, then ki yoinei sheket, then it is a detestable thing. And as we see clearly from the little gimel over here, we paskin like Rav Yeshua, that the mother is allowed to nurse the child until even 4 or 5 years old. So Amar Mar, let's delve a bit deeper into this brisa. Mikan ve'ilach yonik sheketz. The brisa taught us that anything above this age, whether it's 24 months according to Rav Eliezer, whether it's 4 or 5 months according to Rav Yeshua, it's like yonik sheketz, it's disgusting. V'remini asked the Gemara, yonik sheketz literally means one who's nursing from something that's gross. Remini asked the Gemara, I would have thought a milk of those who walk on 2 legs. Tamei, I would think that the milk of a human being is not allowed to be consumed, says the Brisa. Vidinu, and in truth it makes a lot of sense. When it comes to an animal, in which we're makel about touching the animal, that animals do not become tamei, yet achmarta b'chalava, you're machmir about drinking its milk, as Rashi quotes the Gemara in Bechayris, that you're not allowed to drink the milk of a not kosher animal. So says the Gemara, Adam shechmarta b'magai, and Adam, a person in which becomes tamei at different stages, for example, a nida, and you touch the person, he becomes tamei. So certainly, we should be machmer, not be allowed to drink the milk of a human being. Talmud Laimar says the pasuk is a gamol kimalagiru. Says the pasuk, the camel, it brings up its cut. The hooves are not split, and that is what is aser. Continues the Gemara. It says who kimalagiru who. So who tamei? The camel is tamei. But we learn out that the milk of those who walk on 2 feet, human beings, is not tamei, it is allowed to be eaten. Ella tahar. And the Brisa continues, I would think they exclude the milk of a human being. Why? Because it's not universal to all items. It's only, the Isser is only by milk of a non-kosher animal, whereas the milk of a kosher animal is allowed. And don't exclude the blood, whereas the blood of a human being should not be Isser. Why? Should not be excluded from the Isser. We're asking now which item is being said is different from a human to an animal. So suggests the Gemara, maybe milk should not be. The milk of a human being should be like the milk of an non-kosher animal should not be allowed. Whereas when it comes to the blood of a non-kosher animal, the blood should be, a blood of a human being should be not excluded and should be also like everything else. Talmud Loimar, who says the pasuk, who tamei ve'inam al-cheshayim tamei, and the blood of a human being is not tamei, ela tar, rather it is allowed. V'amar Rav Ashi, and concludes this brisa that says, Rav Ashi, afilu mitzvahs aprisha ein boi. There's not even a mitzvah, there's not even a tinder abanan to refrain from the milk of a human being. So I asked the Gemara, you just told me that the brisa says after 24 months you're not allowed to nurse. Why not? We see clearly in this brisa that the milk of a human being is mutter with no stipulations. So explains the Gemara, loy kasha de parish, ha de loy parish. The difference is when milk is separated, when milk is out of the body, whereas when is it aser, is milk that has not been separated. When the baby is sucking the milk directly from the mommy, that is when we're putting a limit, says the Brisa, of 24 months. When it comes into a cup, if breast milk is sitting in a cup, then that's always going to be allowed. Whereas taking the milk, the baby to nurse the milk directly from the mommy, that is when there's going to be a dinder abanan. That's when it's going to be called a sheket, according to the first Brisa of Eliezer, after 24 months. Continues the Gemara, 1 second. V'chilufa b'dam. This is actually an interesting halacha. Many people know this. The opposite with regard to blood, which is what? That if you have a cut and you lick the blood straight off of the cut, if you're sucking blood directly from the body, that's allowed. But once the blood comes out of the body, it's sitting on something else, it's not allowed. Kiritanya is learned in the Raiza, dam shal gabe kikar. If you have blood onto a loaf of bread, you have to take off that blood to eat it, meaning you're not allowed to eat a piece of bread that has some of your blood on it, because once the blood is off of the body, it's forbidden. Shebein shinayim. But if the blood is between your teeth, you're able to suck it, you're able to continue your normal process, and it's not a problem. So the Gemara is not asking a kasha, the Gemara is just pointing out that blood and milk have two different halachas. When it came to breast milk, once the breast milk is out of the body, it's always going to be allowed. But when it came to blood, the moment blood is out of the body, it is not allowed. Which is a very important halacha to know, is that if someone's bleeding at any point and that blood goes on something else, they're not allowed to eat that blacha. That blood, not blood in a bracha, is a blacha. But you're not allowed to eat that blood. So Amar Mar, comments the Gemara in this Brayso of Yeshua, Amar, if you love baby's allowed to nurse if to 4 or 5 years. We learned in a Brayso that even if the child is old enough to be carrying a bundle, is allowed to nurse, meaning there's no age limit. Answers the Gemara, no. When did he mean that he says he's carrying a bundle? That meant the kid's 4 or 5 years old. Amar Rav Yosef, as we already pointed out, halacha ki Rabbi Yoshua. Continues the Gemara, Tanya, we learned in a Brayso. We're 5 lines from the white lines. Samach Amar Aleph. Rav Marinas, Aimer, Koinech, Yoinek, Chalav, Beshabis. Sam Rav Marinas, Goineach, someone who is groaning. Rashi explains what's going on over here. He's having a heart issue. Feels like he's having a heart attack at some level. And what does he need? He needs some milk. So he's allowed to be Yoinek Chalav. He's allowed to nurse milk directly from the goat B'Shabbat on Shabbos. My time, what's the reason? Yoinek mefarkel achayad. Because Yoinek, to nurse directly from an animal, is not a normal thing to do. So that's called mefarik, that's called extracting the malacha on Shabbos of dash, of extracting, of squeezing out something from its source. So squeezing out the milk from its source is forbidden. But if you're doing it in an abnormal way, which is by nursing directly from an animal, that is only aser dirabanan, ubimakam sar like dirabanan. So in a place of pain, there's not going to be this dirabanan, and one would be allowed to nurse directly from an animal on Shabbos. Amar Rav Yosef halacha kiram marinas. That is indeed the psak halacha. And of course, this comes in, which sounds a bit random, because this is Rav Yosef paskening. So we started off with Rav Yosef paskening about the age that one is allowed to nurse their baby until, like Rav Yeshua, even 4 or 5 years old. So we quote another random halacha like Rav Yosef paskins, like Rav Marinas, that someone who is in pain, but makim sar is allowed to nurse directly from the animal. And another similar case, Tanya Nachamish Galya Omer says Nachamish Galya. Tzinar shaluboy kashkashim. If we have a tzinar, a gutter that is filled and clogged up with straw and grass on Shabbos, you're allowed to push down the debris, you're allowed to push down the grass, the clutter, the straw with your foot on Shabbos in private. And you don't have to be worried about it. My time, because you're fixing, you're mitaking, you're unclogging a pipe is a form of fixing. Like because of the pseida, it's going to cause terrible damages. It's mutter. Just to point out, this is a source that some place can want to say that to unclog a stuffed toilet on Shabbos would be a similar thing. That we see over here, the only heter to unstuff this pipe is b'makim seida if it's a loss. But if it's not a loss, clearly, you're not be allowed to unstuff this pipe on Shabbos. So some places can want to say that a plunger would be the same thing. Most places can argue, and they say it's not accurate, that a plunger is not, the stuff of the toilet is not comparable to this case. As we're seeing over here, it's called mitaking. It's called fixing. Over here, it's referring to a case where it's mamish stuff. It's soismin u'ma'akvin, as Rashi points out, and that's not like a regular plunger. However, a similar and actually comparable case would be to use a snake on Shabbos. People have manual snakes in their house, and they want to take a snake and unstuff a toilet. That, the Paiskim say, will not be allowed based on this halacha, because if your toilet is at the net level and it needs a snake, that means that the pipe is fully stuffed. And that would be a form of taking a fixing to unstuff that on Shabbos. And of course, it would only be allowed makom seidah if it's going to cause a loss, etc., but not just to have an extra bathroom on Shabbos. Continues the Gemara, appears of a chayzer kenig sheketz. 4 lines on the bottom of the Amid, the Gemara says that if the child stopped nursing after 24 months, even Rabbi Yeshua agrees, the kid is not allowed to resume. The Kama asks the Gemara, how long is it considered for the child to stop that starting again is forbidden? Amar Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva Amar Shmuel shleisha yamim for 3 days. Igid Yamri, Tani Rav Yehuda bar Chaviva Kamei Shmuel shleisha yamim. 3 days, again the same din, just being said in the name of different people. Tani Rabbanan, continuing the topic of nursing, Meinekes Shameis Baila B'Teich Aser Ma'avar Chaydesh. A mother who is nursing and the husband dies in 24 months of the child's birth. Harei zeh lo tisaris lo tinasi. A halacha that we have seen prior in the Gemara Yevamos. This woman is not allowed to do erusin. She's not allowed to get married. For which reason, as we turn over to Samach Amid Beis, ad Esrim Ha'arba Chodesh Divi Rameir says till 24 months. Why? Because we're nervous if she gets remarried, what's going to happen? As the Tab Rashi speaks out, she might become pregnant. And in the times of Chazal, any pregnant woman, the science was, whether it is not, it's a different discussion, was not able to nurse their child. They had to wean off their child, and the child would be not able to nurse anymore. And the problem is the child will have no food. So that's Rameir. Rabbi Yehuda Ma'atir. Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to. Now, if people are wondering, why don't you just give the child other food? So Rashi, 2 lines on the top, points out that this new husband is not the father of this child, and therefore this new husband is not obligated to give this child eggs and milk to let the child survive. So this child's a mommy, that's an obligation to the baby, so she's not allowed to get remarried because she has to continuously nurse the child. Rav Yehuda Ma'atir b'Shemona Esrei Chodesh by 18 months. Amar Rav Nosson bar Yosef Heini Divrei Beis Shammai Heini Divrei Beis Hillel. This machlekes Rameir and Rav Yehuda is a machlekes Rameir saying like Beis Shammai and Rav Yehuda saying like Beis Hillel. Explains the Gemara 4 lines down. Beis Shammai Yoimrim Esrei Arba Chodesh, Beis Hillel Yoimrim Shemona Esrei Chodesh. So it's the same machlekes. Amar Rashbag Amar Rav Shimon Gamliel Aniach Rila Divrei Yoimrim Esrei Arba Chodesh. I'm going to prove to you, like the opinion of Rav Meir, even though that is like Beis Shammai, that it is indeed 24 months. That after 24 months, excuse me, one more time. Says Rav Shimon Gamliel, according to the one who says 24 months, Aniach Riyah just means he's fixing their statements a little bit. According to the one that says 24 months, mutar s'linasi b'asar l'chodesh. The Divrei Yomer b'shon esrei chodesh, mutar s'linasi b'chamisha chodesh. You're allowed to get married after 15 months. Lefi she'ina cholav ne'ekar, because after a woman becomes pregnant, the milk does not turn turbid, the milk does not sour, ela la'achar shleish chadash, until after 3 months. So says Rav Shimon Gamliel, you don't have to wait a full 24 or a full 18 months. After 21 months or after 15 months, respectively, according to the opinions of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, Rav Yehuda and Rav Meir, she can get remarried. Because even though Rav Meir says, Rav Shammai says you have to wait 24 months. Excuse me, I said it wrong. It's not that we're passing like Beis Shammai. Rav Shimon Gamliel just modifying that according to Rav Meir and Beis Shammai, you have to wait 24 months. That means she can get married at 21 months. Because the milk doesn't turn sour until 3 months into the pregnancy. And according to Rav Yehuda and Beis Hillel, that said you have to wait 18 months. You could get married after 15 months, says Rav Shimon Gamliel. Amar Ula halacha ki Rabbi Yehuda like Beis Hillel, which is 18 months, 15 months. Amar Marokva, and says Marokva li it Rav Chanina. For me, Rav Chanina was matir lasis acher chamisha sechodesh to get married after 15 months, just like the opinion of Rav Yehuda is explained by Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. A similar story, I read that Abaya also came to Abaya. Abaya, sharecropper, came in front of Abaya and Amar Lei and said to Abaya, Ma'uli Aris v'chamisha zichaydesh, can you do Eris after 15 months? Amar Lei, so responds Abaya, Chado, number 1, you're allowed to do Rav Meir, Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda. Number 1, we pass like Rav Yehuda, that 18 months, which means 15 months. Void which means 15 months. V'amar Ula, and Ula taught us halacha Rav Yehuda. So 3 different reasons. First of all, we pass like Rav Meir, we pass like Beis Hillel, and Ula taught us explicitly we pass like Rav Yehuda. V'amar Mar Ukva liyit Rav Chanina lizas zacher chamesha tichaydish. And we had an actual story in which Mar Ukva said he was allowed to get remarried after 15 months. Kol shekein da'at la'ares. Certainly, they only want to know about Erisin, it's allowed. Meaning, we're talking about an Nisu in real marriage. Certainly, if you ask about Erisin, that is allowed. Explains the Gemara further, about 20 lines down. First line is key. That is what Abaya said. Says Rav Yosef, you're wrong. Rav and Shmuel say 24 months aside for the day of the child's birth. Aside for the day of the Erisin. Rahat Basrei Tulasa Barsai. So once Abaya heard that indeed the psak is not like Rameir, but rather that Rav and Shmuel say if they full 24 months, he ran after the sharecropper for 3 parsais. Barmala parsa, some say he ran for 1 parsa. Bechala in sand. V'loi adrachei. But unfortunately, Abaya was not able to reach the sharecropper to tell him that he paskined incorrectly. And Amar Abaya, hi, Milsa Damar Rabbanan. This is what the Rabbanan taught us. Afilu biata bekochta. Even something as simple as making an egg with kutach mutter loy lishri inish b'makayim rabbi. Should never paskin even a simple sheila in front of your teacher. Loy misham nemechazi kafkarusa. And explains Abaya, you know why? Not because it looks like that it's disrespectful. Ela misham do mistaya milsa. You're not going to have siyata dishmaya. You're not going to have the heavenly assistant to pass correctly. And on this, says the Gemara lemeimra. Excuse me, siyata milsa lemeimra. You're not going to have the correct heavenly assistant to pass correctly. The Ha explains Abaya Ana v'gamirna leilahad Rav Shmuel. I learned this halach of Rav Shmuel. Says Abaya, I knew that psak halach was really 24 months. Still, I do not have the correct siyata d'shmaya because the fact I paskind in front of my Rebbe, teaching us the utmost and critical importance, even at something so simple, never can one paskin in the same place as his Rebbe. Continues the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. We're about 12 lines from the wide lines. First line is Achi, Nasna Benalami Nekes, Agam Lasa Yaimes. If a nursing mother, her husband died, and she gave the child to a wet nurse, or what did she do? She weaned the child. Or there is unfortunately no longer a child, the child is nifter, mutares linase miyad, she's got to get remarried right away. They thought to do something like this brisa, that a mother that hired a wet nurse, they wanted to allow her to remarry even before 24 months. There was a certain old lady that was here that said, I had a story about Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman didn't allow me to get remarried within the 24 months. Says the Gemara, really? But Rav Nachman allowed in the house of the Reish Kalusa, there were widows, there were almanas, that gave over their children to a wet nurse, and Rav Nachman allowed them to get remarried. Answers the Gemara, Shiny Beirish Klusa Deloihadebrahu. That case is different. Why? Because once they hire the wet nurse, they're never going to retract. But says Rav Papa and Ravuna Breder Yeshua that you shouldn't pass in this way. Why? Because this elderly woman, this Safta, is saying that Rav Nachman taught that there should be a concern that they're going to back out on their deal of hiring the wet nurse. So Amar Lo Rapapi says Rapapa and Ravuna Breder Yeshua Va'aton Lo Tizbru, and you do not think it's also meaning. Rapapa and Ravuna Breder Yeshua said, really, we thought that we could allow her to get remarried within 24 months. If a woman hires a wet nurse, they thought it's not a problem. They just said, but this elderly woman taught us it is a problem. So says Rapapi, really? You thought it's not a problem? But what about the Me'adatanya? The following Braisa. If a woman whose husband dies and was always in the habit of going to her father's house, and she spent a bunch of time there, before her husband died. She was angry with her husband before he died. Or if the husband was in jail before he was nifter. The husband overseas. He was old. Or if she was not able to have children, or she was elderly and couldn't have children. Islandess, or she was an islandess and therefore never was able to have children. Or a katana, or she's a young woman who couldn't have children. Or if she miscarried after her husband's death. Or then she can't give birth right now. So in all these cases, these are all scenarios in which clearly the woman is unable to be pregnant and give birth right now. Kulan Sricha says the Gemara in the first white line, Shloisha Chadashim Tivri Ramir. Ramir says you have to wait 3 months. Rav Yosi Matil Arizanasim Miyad. You got to do Erisin right away. Because clearly when the husband died, she's not pregnant, because either he was overseas, she was away, they were in a fight, she's not able to get pregnant, etc. That so even though it's impossible in all these scenarios for her to be pregnant, still the halacha is that we have to wait 3 months, because that is the gezeira. Anytime a woman's husband dies, she's not able to get remarried within 3 months. So ask the Gemara, the same thing should be by us. We had a story in which we know the halacha is that a woman has to nurse her child for 24 months, and she cannot get remarried within the 24 months. And we said, but wait, if she hires a wet nurse, maybe it should change. But asks Rav Papi, we see clearly when it comes to these gezeiras, even when the svara, the tam, the reason isn't there, even when a woman shouldn't have to wait 3 months, she has to wait the 3 months, because that's the halacha, that's the gezeira. So why should our case be any different? Amrulay. So Rav Huna and Rav Yeshua respond to Rav Papi, Lav Adaitin. You're right, we didn't think of that brisa. So what's the psak halacha? Says the Gemara v'Hilchasa. What's the halacha? Meis mutter. If the child dies within the 24 months, then she could indeed get remarried. But kam lasai, she weaned the child, it's aser. Mar bar Ravashi Amar Avilu Meis nami aser. Why? Telma katlale Rachmana Litzlan. You have to be nervous that the mother might kill her child, v'azla mitzvah, so that she could go and get remarried. And we conclude today, Rabbi Ovda v'Chankase, there indeed was a story in which a mother choked her child, Rachmana Litzlan, so that she was able to get remarried. V'loi says the Gemara, that's not a raya. That woman was a shaita, it's not a normal thing that a woman's going to kill her child so she could get remarried. And we will pick it up, Siyat Nishmaya, from the next Tanur Rabbanan, the next Shir, Emir to Hashem.